Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is Jeff Jones, and with me today is a partial panel. And so let's meet the panel. We'll start on top and say hello to Kelly. Welcome, Kelly, and good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, panel. Hello, everyone in chat. Dr. Silkman, I hope you've packed everything away because I believe we're continuing on from last week's episode.
Yep, I'm in a padded cell.
Thank you, Cal. And Big Jeff, nice to see you. Good evening over there. Unfortunately, I think you still have some smoke in the air.
Yeah, that's true, Jeff. The weather is actually a little bit chilly for the month of June, and when you step outside, you can actually smell the smoke from the Canadian wildfire. So I know that those wildfires are presenting sort of an ecological. I don't want to rise to the level of disaster, but certainly that it's going to take years for that vegetation and foliage to recover, but it will. It will. But in the meantime, it's not a pleasant sight or a good thing for Canada or the Canadian people. So my heart goes out to them for that. As we continue on, just looking at that picture, we know that we're going to hear some good things from those judges who support Brendan, who are questioning the state's what do we call them, iceberg. But we know that this is going to be an episode that gets your blood boiling. So get ready, batten down the hatches, and get ready, to hide the iPads, put the children to bed, and get ready for some get ready for some explosive commentary from the fan.
Well, absolutely, Big Jeff. Thank you so much for that opening. And Dr. Silkman, great to have you back. Welcome and good morning.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's great to be here, and I'd like to say hi to all my fellow panel members and everyone in chat. Yeah, this is a bit of a tough section that we're going through at the moment, but let's dive in and let's check it out.
Does that lead to this?
The question of whether there was enough evidence is a question for the jury. Habeas is not a license for federal courts to play backup jury.
When we try to evaluate whether it was voluntary, we can look at the corroborating circumstances around it, can't we?
I don't think you can. No, the Supreme Court has consistently said that reliability is a question for the jury. It's not something you consider on voluntariness. Now, I want to go back to the memories of Teresa that I was mentioning, because I think that's one of the primary evidences that his confession was voluntary, the way he volunteered those details. He remembered her desperately trying to move away as Avery came at her with a knife. He remembers her breathing after Avery stabbed her in the stomach, and that she's still struggling to breathe after he cut her throat. And he remembered the awful smell as her body burned. None of those memories were suggested to him. They were very raw and they were very real.
They were also very made up. I'm sorry, but I had to break that into it because he's coming from it in a view that this is all legit, but we know that it was okay. So he was fed information. We know that, and he projected the baseline of what we know that was fed to him. The details that this guy is latching onto is, I know this sounds weird, but it's just common sense. It's just fillers of detail. And didn't we all just say in terms of the Pam Sturm situation, sometimes too many details are what makes it bogus because it's over exaggerated. Sorry, it's just frustrating to hear him say that.
Well, Kelly, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Berg has to basically believe that what Brendan said is the truth. Berg cannot say anything that counteracts the state. If Berg has any doubt on what Brendan Dassey said as being the truth, the entire case against Brendan will collapse. So hence, he's got to toe the line exactly like Brad Schimmel has for a long period of time. So therefore, Berg has to stand up in front of those 7 judges and say, oh, yeah. What Brendan did, what Brendan said is the truth. That's his only position that he can take.
He resisted the officers numerous times.
He's
Asked
guessing. I mean, you see this as resistance. I see this as him sort of casting about. You see these long delays. He's all over the map, and you can pick a sentence here and a sentence there and knit together a confession, but it's not what really happened.
It's true, he changes some details here and there.
Changes important details.
But that's exactly what you would expect for a traumatic memory like this. That's how
memory works. It's also what you would expect from somebody who is trying to say what the officers want to hear. The investigators made my skin crawl watching this video, this lulling behavior that they conveyed, which was so dishonest, so dishonest.
There was some minor deception.
Minor deception. Every time they say, we know what happened, you just have to tell us. That's a lie, because they didn't know what happened. And they still don't know what happened. They might think they know, but they have no fucking idea what happened, right? Every single time they say it's going to be all right. That's a lie, right? If we went through and counted the number of lies that they told based on the false statements, how did she put it? I forget the exact phraseology she used, but it was absolutely brilliant. Sort of the I can't even remember what she said. You just said it 3 seconds ago. How making him feel safe in this place, and it being completely dishonest. So true. How everyone cannot see this is beyond. Unbelievable that they were allowed to do it. Unbelievable that this thing stood.
It is truly remarkable how Luke Berg is trying to diffuse and trivialize all the criticisms by the judges, especially those female judges that were highly critical of what Fassbender and Wiegert did to Brendan Dassey. It's remarkable that Berg can stand up in front of the judges and try and trivialize everything.
I gotta say, spot on, Dr. Silkman. It is truly remarkable. The part that I want to pick out is the part where he says the minor deception. Now, to me, if we split a pizza and I take more than half, that I would consider that a minor deception. If you force a confession out of a 16-year-old boy, I characterize that as a major deception. Okay, so that's where I stand on this. I didn't mean to make you guys hungry or anything, but a minor deception, that's the iPad smasher for me. I just think, and then way he's arguing back and forth with the judge about no, you have to see it. I don't know. It's all too much.
That the investigators actually said were true. So their statements will go to bat for you, for example. They did, in fact, go to bat for him.
If he had stuck with his story and testified against Avery, I suspect they would have.
That's exactly right.
That was a very important point about going to bat for him. And the judge said, yes, they would have if he had testified against his uncle.
If I could take a step back for a second and readdress what the judge on the right-hand side said, if he had testified, they probably would have gone to bat. Well, is this a deception again or not, right? If Kelly, I tell you, hey, look, I'm going to be your friend forever. You'd expect me to, sort of be your friend forever. But then if I had to say, well, I would have been for her friend forever. She only sent me that $50,000 that we didn't talk about in this conversation. That's a major deception. I'm going to go to bat for you means I'm going to go to bat for you irrespective of what you do. There wasn't a condition applied to I'm going to go to bat for you. It says I'm going to go to bat for you. What does that mean? What is that going to mean to Brendan that they're going to try and help him out? There's not a condition attached to it. It's more of the same bullshit. It's more of the same major deception to Brendan, to try and put him in a place where he feels comfortable, where he can continue to spin this wild yarn.
It's found otherwise. What do we do about that?
It did, Your Honor, and may it please the court. Deference, by definition, does not preclude relief. That is what we know from the Supreme Court. Relief is reserved for cases where the application of clearly established law has been unreasonably misapplied in the state courts, and that's precisely what we see here.
Would you say that the police here use tactics, quote, so offensive to a civilized system of justice that they must be condemned under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment?
I would, Your Honor.
And what are those?
Those tactics include issuing a promise of leniency to Brendan Dassey.
There was no promise of leniency.
Not
There were
when
vague
judged,
assurances at best.
not when judged by the standard of an adult.
Even with an intellectually challenged 16-year-old, there has to be a concrete promise, fraudulent promise of leniency for it to bear on the voluntariness of the confession.
Miller
Vague assurances are not enough.
We accept the fact that he has a lower IQ. That's it. Anybody that has an IQ of that level can't be questioned the way he was.
Certainly not, Your Honor. This is a unique
This
fact
was not
case.
an aggressive questioning.
It is a case of psychological coercion. There was a promise
Well,
of
there's
leniency.
no right. In fact, there's case law that says they can bluff.
They can bluff, Your Honor, but they cannot so distort his rational will that he was
That's
incapable
because of
of,
his IQ.
and his impairments and his disabilities and his age. Yes, Your Honor.
And the fact that he is 95% more suggestible than the population.
I think this is a totality point that you're making. The Supreme Court has told us, not to get too, if you will, siloed in our thinking about this, that Brendan is of lower intelligence or that he's this or he's that. He's a package.
So, Ms. Narita, if we were to affirm the grant of habeas relief in this case, which you've described as unique, what practical advice would you give to police about what is and is not permissible in interrogating a...
I just wanted to preempt everyone. This was the real reason we're hearing it right now, and that is to protect the system, because these guys, the dissenting judges, were not stupid. They realized that if Brendan Dassey was released, it meant that something was rotten in their system, in their questioning, in the use of the Reed technique.
Part of the reason for that is because it would need to be retroactively applied, right? All of a sudden, anyone who felt that they were wrongfully convicted on the basis of the Reed technique might have grounds to come forward. Kind of similar to some of the forensic evidence that we've discussed in the previous, in the previous podcast. But to me, all the judges are going to get their hair in a bunch pretty soon about, oh, are we making new law? Is that not, and that's a terrible thing to do. We don't do that. What is so horrible about saying that, yeah, if you have an intellectually disadvantaged teenager, you can't use the Reed technique? Okay, well, guess who agrees with that? The developer of the Reed technique. Why is that so hard? What is the problem? With making that assertion, sort of making that quote unquote rule going forward, because the developer of the technique himself says this should not be applied to this type of person because of the risk of wrongful confession. What's so hard?
I just wanted to add one point before we move on, in that I just didn't appreciate this Judge Silver Fox here. Why would Laura have to give advice to other law enforcement about the repercussions of this ruling? That is not her charge to include, oh, and here are my recommendations for law enforcement as what they should do. That has nothing to do with this case. And I personally found that line of questioning to be borderline deflecting and gaslighting a little bit, to be honest, because it doesn't really make any rational sense why Laura would be responsible for advising law enforcement about how to conduct interrogations if this case was to be affirmed. And I just thought it was outright outlandish of him, actually. That's how I feel.
Yep, completely outlandish. But the other, I'm not sure because I haven't seen the entire transcript, but Laura should have said, well, that's exactly what Judge Duffin said as well initially, right? That's why we're here, Judge.
High school boy who's not very quick.
Taking this case as an example, These interrogators had at least some reason to believe he might be limited. He wasn't able to spell agent or detective.
So
on
what should
February
they do?
27th.
So what should they do? What can they
give him
do
back.
to solve the crime?
They may still question him. There's no doubt about that. But
Can they
can't
bluff?
say things. They may, as long as it doesn't overbear his will. They should never say things like, I'm a cop, but I'm not right now.
You're creating new law now. There is no case that says that, and we're here on 2254D review. A federal court cannot create new law on habeas review, and that's what you're asking for in this case. It's just flatly impermissible under all the Supreme Court's precedents.
Your Honor, I am not asking for the creation of new law.
That
I'm
is
asking for this
exactly what
court to
you're
apply
doing.
decades-old
You're
law.
identifying criteria and things that the cops cannot do. There is no case that says they cannot do those things.
I am not asking this
You're
court.
asking us to use this case to establish that new benchmark for investigators in interrogating juveniles. There is no case law to support that. Under established law, under 2254D, you must lose.
That judge there just summarized the insanity of the entire deal. According to the law, there is nothing we can do. To me, guys, that's a shocking admittance by a high court judge telling Laura Nyrider there's nothing we can do. You want us to now create new law for Brendan Dassey? We're not going to do it. Sorry. Did you hear what she said? You must lose.
We have, in front of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, there's a famous statue of a lady justice who's blindfolded, and she has her scales, and the imagery is meant to connote the fact that justice is blind, and all you have in your hand is these scales, and it's sort of the weight of the truth, the facts, that's going to tip the scales. And what she is basically saying is that, from the judging perspective, it doesn't matter, you lose. We're not going to apply any necessary reason here. We're not going to, think about what makes sense to do, with regard to continued misapplication of an interrogation technique to intellectually challenged youth. That's okay. It's fine. Our hands are tied here. You're judges. You can do just about goddamn anything you want to. And this is clearly a case where they should have stepped forward and said, look, even the inventors of the technique say it's not right. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to do. Therefore, the ruling stands. Why is that so hard?
Killer?
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
What was the motive of the police in doing this? Get a second killer?
Your Honor, the test does not direct us.
No, I know that's not the test. That's the question I'm asking you.
The record doesn't speak to the motive of the police in this case.
You're arguing their motive.
I am not, Your Honor. In fact, the district court here, in granting relief, pointed out that the police may well have simply failed to appreciate the way in which their words landed on Brendan Dassey, but it does not preclude relief under the principles of Miller versus Fenton.
Two killers.
No, Your Honor, they needed the truth. But the problem with this interrogation is that the way in which they pressured and pursued Brendan Dassey was in direct contravention of the seeking of the truth.
Here's a question for the panel. What are the vast number of benefits that the state's case had by getting the second victim? I bet we could fill up the rest of the podcast with answering this question, and they'd all be great points.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. And, Ken Kratz really said it all, right? Prior to Brendan Dassey talking, the state had no idea what happened to Teresa Halbach, right? They had no narrative. Brendan Dassey gave them the narrative that they were after. And Ken Kratz in the press conference said, we now know what to look for. Excuse me? That's why they got the additional search warrants to go in the garage, and all of a sudden they find item FL. And look what the judge said about the shell casings. Where were the shell casings found, right? So they then go back into Stephen Avery's bedroom and rip the place apart all over again. They don't find anything there, right? Prior to that, the key suddenly falls out of the cabinet, right? So Brendan was able to give them a narrative of what happened to Teresa Halbach, because forensically, they had no idea, right? Their forensic team proved that Teresa Halbach was not in Stephen Avery's trailer.
In the garage?
In the garage, Your Honor.
I think you're about to run out of time. If you would like to wrap up.
All right. If there are no further questions at this time, I would ask this court to affirm the district court's grant of habeas relief.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Berg.
We're on habeas here. This is now the 6th time that a court has reviewed this case in a decade.
Right, and a number
Hundreds
of
of
courts
pages
have
have been
found that
written.
there's a real problem with this. You've got the district court, magistrate judge, and you've got the panel in this case. So I don't know that this is a slam dunk.
In all of the filings and all of the opinions, you will not find a single case, not one. Not from the Supreme Court, not from a federal court, not from a state court, not on de novo review, not on habeas review. You will not find one case finding a confession involuntary in circumstances similar to this. Courts have consistently held that minor lies about what they know is not coercive. They've held that vague assurances are not coercive. Fatherly manner is not coercive.
All of that may be true, but the question is the recipient. If I were to say things to my 4-year-old grandson, you know, he's not going to understand it the way you would, or at least I hope that maybe you've moved a bit beyond. You say things to an adult that are not the same as you would say things to a younger person.
Absolutely.
All right, I see your yellow and now your red piece of paper. So if you'd like to wrap up in one sentence, you may do so.
The whole point of EDTA is to prevent the second guessing of juries and state courts a decade later. The district court and the panel majority did exactly that. Please reverse.
Here's what's going on. So a lot of cameras, a lot of interest in this case. Language made my skin crawl from one of the judges today at looking at that video. Talk about that.
I've seen the videos, and what makes my skin crawl is knowing the things that happened to Teresa Halbach.
Big Jeff, I just knew he was going to say that. Like, you knew he was going to say that, right? You knew he was going to say it, right?
I couldn't get my my hand to the mute button fast enough because it has to come back to the heinousness of the crime, right? Because that's all you have. It's I'm gonna evoke emotion by pointing to the heinousness of the crime. We're talking about the fact that he didn't do it, right? Talking about, you know, he obviously, as Dr. Silkman pointed out in, you know, this podcast or the previous one, but by the things that he says, it's just pretty obvious that he was not there for any of you know, for any murder or rape. So, you know, when they have nothing, all they can do is evoke emotion. Yeah, look how bad this was. Well, what we're trying to say is that he didn't do it. This confession was coerced. So, you know, invoking the heinousness of the crime, it's probably all you have, and it's probably about as dirty of a trick as you can pull.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Big Jeff said. This is a theme that we see right throughout the trials and right throughout all the press conferences. Now, of course, you must think of the Halbach family. You must think of Teresa. But to use that emotional card all the time when you know you've got nothing, when you've got absolutely nothing but Brendan Dassey's own words, you know that your system has failed you, right? Of course, it's a heinous crime, but you got to have the right people, the right person in prison.
Not that this young man is uncomfortable talking about it and reliving it. Teresa's family relives this every day.
Good. Spell your first and last name and pronounce it, please.
Brad Schimmel, Schimel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, did I get an interview? I don't know if you did them. I was outside, so if not.
Oh, we did, yeah.
Did you?
We did.
But
Well, we
Brad,
just
the
did our-
easier I can do it as we go.
We just did our press legal already.
Can I get one quick comment? I'm from Green Bay.
Yeah.
I want to do like a
Across the street.
yeah balance and do like this. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I just want to kind of know the proceedings that kind of came out of there today and what you thought of it, Brad.
The question here in this case is not for this court to decide whether Brendan Dassey is innocent. The question here is really a federalism question. Under United States statutes, how much authority does the federal court have to go in and substitute its judgment for the determination of the jury and the trial court judges in the state appellate courts?
So this is truly remarkable. And it goes to show, guys, when you have your day in court, you got to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Because once the jury has made their decision, to reverse it is nigh impossible. And that's what Schimmel was trying to get at. You know, how much power does a panel of judges have to overturn a jury, right? Because remember, the argument is, well, those 12 jurors, they're his peers in society. They listened to the evidence and they judged him on it.
What I'd like to point out in this is I believe that Mr. Schimmel is wrong on the facts, right? Because he tried to say that this case is about a court overturning a jury. I don't think that's what this case. This case is addressing the admissibility of the confession, right? So, it's not the heavy hand of the court reaching in and saying, well, the jury got it wrong. It's the court saying, look, a key piece of evidence that the jury was provided with, which was the confession, was incorrectly obtained, right? I mean, it's a false confession. This story has to be told to a jury with a different light. So it's not so much saying that the jury got it wrong. It's saying that the evidence that the jury heard was tainted by the wrongful confession, and we need to do something about it. We need to retry him, with different caveats being given about this confession. Maybe it not even being admissible at all. In my mind, there's a subtle but very important difference between the federal court reaching down and simply overturning the verdict, and the federal court reaching in and saying, "Hey, look, this piece of evidence, is so severely tainted that it needs to be reconsidered, and it's not it." At the end of the day, they might have the same effect, right? And that's for all practical purposes overturning the confession, because as we've said many times, all we have is Brendan's own words against him. However, there's a huge difference between just kind of going in and flipping that switch and saying, oh yeah, it's overturned, and saying, oh well, the critical piece of evidence had fundamental problems, right? I hope people can see the difference there. So I believe Mr. Schimmel is trying to gaslight us by saying, oh, we don't want the federal court reaching in and overturning the jury. Well, that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to assess the fundamental correctness and justice behind the presentation of the evidence in the trial. So to me, there's a huge difference. Wrong on the facts, Mr. Ship.
Oh, correct. But in this particular case, can you see the severity? And that is the only evidence that the state has against Brendan Dassey is exactly what you just said, Big Jeff, his own words. There is no corroborating forensic evidence, right? And even his attorney said it during the trial. There's no hair, there's no fiber, there's no DNA, there are no fingerprints, there's no sweat. There is nothing forensically tying Brendan to Teresa Halbach or what happened to Teresa Halbach. Nothing but words.
If you look at what the unique facts were that the prosecution relied on, it was a script of what Teresa was supposedly saying and doing in the bedroom. And the forensic evidence refutes that Teresa was ever in the bedroom. There is no proof she was raped. There's no proof anything happened in the bedroom. We know there's no proof anything happened in the garage. She wasn't shot in the garage. Even when the judge asked, well, there were shell casings. The response is, well, Judge, this was on a 40-acre salvage yard, and there were casings all over the place because these people were hunting, shooting rabbits, shooting gophers, and all of that. I could tell when he asked that question, he's thinking, well, that shooting must have occurred in the garage, because in his garage on the north side of Chicago, there's no shell casings. But see, you have to tell him that, because he's thinking, oh, there must have been a shooting in the garage. It's that misperception, and it's the opportunity to correct those things. And so I think if the defense had a better grasp of the facts of the forensic evidence, that would have been very powerful. Why do we need two killers in this? The answer to that isn't to avert and not answer it. The answer is, I'll tell you why, Judge. The reason wasn't to have two killers for the fun of it. The reason was to take down Stephen Avery. They needed someone else to corroborate what the forensic evidence refuted. Just knowing all that, being able to refute it all. It's like there's this big tidal wave coming towards you, and you have to be able to knock out the whole thing. You've got to have an impenetrable wall up where you can just deflect everything they come up with. Everything has to be answered. And when you leave an oral argument and you have not answered on a confession why those are not unique facts, you're in trouble.
Did you find some? You're really getting gray. Tell me about it. No, I don't need to tell you. Because so am I. Yeah, I think we've got to pick up those pills tomorrow for that. You didn't pick them up today? No, we couldn't. Why? I don't know. If I would have known that, I would have picked them up today after work. And you're slacking again. Who is? You are. I don't do that. The other ones all do that. You're slacking on papers, and I don't want a blue one now. I'm going to quit. Then I'll quit. We'll have half a head curly. Yeah. Loosen that one, just a notch. Mother, I'm not going to get done. Better? Have you got a deadline again? No, if you keep telling me to loosen it. Well, it hurts. I got too small of a spot right here. Can you move in a little bit? All right, I'll get up and then you push the chair. I want to be a full family, not a partial family. I want us all to be together. And my parents are getting old. And I know it's going to come sooner or later, and I want them both out before that even happens.
These years are going by fast. Chucky, I think, is 63 years old already.
Okay. Man, get out of the way.
So that makes me an old fart. I wanted the boys to succeed. But when I'm gone, I don't think they'll be doing it. Because it's a dirty job.
I want to go through what I think's the most important evidence in the case, which is the sequencing of who was doing what when Teresa came on the property. And so what I want to do is I want to reconstruct that whole sequence of events to determine if Bobby Dassey actually left the property within a minute or two of Teresa and followed her when she turned left and met up with his soon-to-be stepfather, Scott Toddick, and they are somehow involved in the murder. And so I want to do that sequence and see if I can make that fit on the timeline. So I think it's highly likely that that was the sequence of what happened. Assuming the Don Plitzka phone call happened at 2:27, which I believe that it did, Teresa arrived at 147 and Avery Road around 2:31. One of the things that I learned being out there is the property is so huge compared to what most people think. You have to go at least a quarter of a mile down Avery Road, even to get to Mr. and Mrs. Avery's residence. Then you take a right turn and you go down another long road, probably not quite a quarter of a mile, to Stephen's trailer and where Barb's trailer was immediately east of it. we think that she arrives on the Avery property at 2:35. Stephen is starting to initiate a call to her and hangs up without it connecting because he looks out his window and he sees her. So what Stephen has consistently said in his interviews and police reports is that when Teresa arrived, she never comes to the trailer. He walks out to her car. She gives him the document. He gives her the money, and she drives off.
So the money and then information for the car. Perfect.
Gave her the $40. She gave you an Auto Trader magazine.
Yeah.
Okay, and then she was there.
She went to the car and got me there.
Now you said you were inside your home when she pulled up.
Yeah.
Okay. And the contact you had with her only lasted for how many minutes?
Within 5 minutes.
And then from after you're done with her and she gives you the book, where do you go to?
I go back in the house.
Okay. And how long are you there for?
Probably, I don't know, drop off the book. Then I walked over by Barbara.
By where?
By Barbara, my sister.
Okay.
I said Bobby was home, but Bobby was already gone. He just left.
So she leaves, you put the Auto Trader magazine in your house.
Yeah, and I went over there.
And you walked right over right away?
Well, he was gone. He just left.
Bobby did?
Yeah.
Did you see him leave?
No.
So he was already gone?
Yeah, he just left.
Did he drive somewhere? Or what did he drive?
Yeah, he took his Blazer.
Do you know where he went?
No.
Okay, let's go back to the van.
Good. So the money and then information for the car. Perfect.
How do you get to the point of going from the van where she's taking the picture to her vehicle for the book?
Walk.
You ask her for a book?
No, she said I got the book in the truck.
Okay. So then you follow her towards the truck.
Yeah.
What happens next?
No, she opened the door. She got in. Then she reached over.
She sit down inside?
Yeah.
She reaches over to where to get the book?
Yeah. The passenger side.
And then she just hand it out to you?
Yeah.
Does she get back out of the truck again?
No.
And she just leaves?
Yeah.
Is Bobby home then or no?
Yeah, Bobby's home.
Okay. And does he come out or anything, or does he see you leave or see her leave?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
But you know he's home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's home at that point.
When she leaves, he's home?
Yeah. And just when I walked in the house, I come back and he was gone.
So just in that moment of you saying goodbye to Teresa, going to your house with the paper and coming back, you notice that he's gone.
Yeah.
But while she's giving you that thing, he's still there.
Yeah.
So okay.
Within, I don't know, that second,
Uh-huh.
he probably at the same time, almost.
Okay, so but the time that it took you to walk from her vehicle to your place, to drop out that thing, and then to walk right back outside again?
Yeah.
He's gone.
He's gone.
Okay.
He looks and he sees that Bobby's truck isn't there. And then he looks out to the road and Teresa's making a left turn on 147. She was actually exiting the Avery property at around 2:38. What he didn't realize, and we didn't realize, was that Bobby's actually probably about 150 yards behind Teresa. But Bobby is in the part of the road that dips down where you can't even see the top of his truck. Stephen goes back in the truck.
Yeah, we're going to have to stop it at some point. I love this reenactment, guys. The splicing in between Skorinsky and the things that in the interviews with Stephen and the way that this is cut is really some of the finest film work, just from a film work standpoint. The way it was edited to really try to visualize Kathleen Zellner's narrative and the one that she was trying to go with at appeal. And so I hate to stop it in the middle. I know there's more to go, But there was just so much to unpack right there. So I will open it up for you guys to just weigh in, if you would.
I believe that the first part of her narrative is really based upon the stories that Stephen has consistently told, combined with the cell phone evidence. So there's not really a strong reason to dispute the story that she tells all the way up to you know, her Teresa Hallback handing Stephen the Auto Trader book. You know, what Stephen sees or not, you know, based on the Bobby's blazer being there or not. I don't know about that, but I certainly, you know, the bulk of everything else prior to that is corroborated with you know, digital forensic evidence. So you know, I think that's quite believable, and I think the narrative we're going to hear, you know, that goes along with the rest of the stories is kind of highly speculative. You know, it's for some reason, you know, and when I first started watching Ma'am, you know, I very much appreciated this about Kathleen, was that she feels it important to sort of understand or solve the case, if you will. She wants to know who the murderer is. I'm not sure she's doing that to her detriment in this case. You know, but you know, her goal is to get her client off. One way to get her client off is to create a Denny suspect, or you know, potentially more than one Denny suspect, and you know, use that to get her client a new trial. I appreciate that. You know, whether she actually believes it or not, I'm not really sure. But she's needs to create a story to, you know, frame that Denny narrative, and this is what her story is going to be. I think there's holes in it, and I think people are going to have more to say about it.
The editing was very clever. It was great to have that visual effect. So you're hearing them walk you through it, and then they produce that visual so you can see, okay, that makes sense. For me, like Big Jeff was just saying, she's creating a Denny. We just saw a few minutes ago about the day planner. She was creating a Denny, a suspect for Ryan. And we know that because in her original motion, it was all about Ryan. She actually made the actual statement in her original motion before she made the supplement to add Bobby that there is only one killer, and it's Ryan Hillegas. So she's, in this perspective, she's just creating that defense mechanism because that's her job. Her job is to create reasonable doubt and to show that there was other possibilities and other suspects that should have and could have been explored more. And in all fairness, let's be real, Bobby does make a great Denny up front because he does have, at least at that point, in a sense, two of the main prongs. He had the opportunity because he was there, he was present, and he has the direct connection. And this is minus the witnesses. He has that direct connection because he has the connection in a sense that he had the opportunity to flag her down and be in her presence. Let's face it, this is essentially the entire case right now. Where this is where we're at. Her whole latest motion is based on this. So this is why we're at the most fundamental part of Making a Murderer Part 2, Episode 9, because it's literally leading us into the now.
And I've spent, countless hours and hours on this very moment, this seminal moment here, where the story diverges between Bobby Dassey and Stephen Avery, because I'm trying to work out a potential scenario in which nothing nefarious took place, right? In other words, both what Bobby observed and what Stephen observed are mutually inclusive. In other words, if Bobby's timing is slightly out, if Stephen's timing is slightly out, both observations could be satisfied, you know? I've always been concerned about this narrative here. But at the end of the day, we mustn't forget what Kathleen Zellner is trying to do is a timed reconstruction, right? Now, that's exactly what the state did in 1985 for Stephen Avery, right? Did he have enough time to where he was to get down to the beach to sexually assault Penny Bernstein, right? They had to bend a couple of rules and factors in order to make it work. But the state did it. The state did it back in 1985, which means that what Kathleen Zellner is doing now with this reconstruction of times is completely legitimate. And in actual fact, it's a pity that the defense and the state didn't do something similar back in when the court case was on.
Big Jeff, the floor is yours to give us another wide-ranging episode. We're bouncing back and forth between different narratives and maybe feeling a little whiplash here today. But the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, I think whiplash is the right word, because there's a lot that culminates in the en banc appeal finale, if you will. I think they got 30 minutes each, and there's a whole lot of case for Brendan to really make a narrative of in 30 minutes. Some pretty hostile questions from the judges to both attorneys on both sides, which on the one hand you like to see, because you do like to see sort of a confrontational kind of a system that's really aimed at rooting out the truth. I think they're going to get the answer wrong, and I don't necessarily think that the justices who will eventually side with Mr. Berg necessarily had a sufficient comprehension of the case. But we saw what we saw, and it was I think Laura Nyrider, a lot of debate, I think, in the community about how good of a job she did. Should it have been Steve Drizzen that argued that case? A lot of people say that. I think this might have been Laura's first presentation to the higher courts. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? She has a lot of passion about the case. I think for the most part, she did a good job. I think there are just a couple of questions that I would have liked to seen her have stronger answers to. Doesn't make her a bad person. Doesn't make her ill-prepared. You don't know what curveballs are coming, as was discussed. And I actually, in retrospect, and watching this episode, having not watched this episode in a while, I found Kathleen Zellner a lot more critical than I remember of Laura Nyrider with regard to having command over the facts of the case. I didn't remember Kathleen being so, quite so poignant of her criticism of Laura's performance, but that's the way she felt. She's entitled to her opinion. But anyway, just a lot of sort of raw emotion associated with the Brendan's case. And then flipping back to Stephen, trying to understand what this time narrative is. I mean, that's Kathleen Zellner is practicing what she preaches. She says it's important to understand every single piece of evidence, all possible facets, all possible angles. That's why she's doing this, to see what's feasible and see what's not. And as we discussed at the end of the day, this does tie very pertinently into her current motion, which is might as well be titled Bobby the Denny. Because she's trying desperately to be able to, to be able to frame Bobby as a viable. I mean, look, I said it before. You can name me as a Denny if you want. I don't care, right? I mean, being named a Denny means
you're a Denny.
Yeah, go ahead. Name me a Denny, right? It's not necessarily, even a sufficient accusation that you can even arrest me on the crime. Right. All it means is, means, motive, connection to the crime. It doesn't mean an imminent arrest. It means that Stephen Avery's constitutional rights were violated by the inability to name you by name in the trial. And I think if Kathleen Zellner gets a new trial, I think that Stephen walks. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, because there's just a lot of shenanigans that went on in this case that we know very well in retrospect, and the state is desperate not to have that new trial. I think there's a large bridge to cross to get there. And if Big Jeff the Denny is one of those ways that we can get there, hey, I'm all for it. That's fine with me, because it's not really the type of accusation that a lot of people make it out to be. But that being said, I think that's the type of stuff we're going to discuss in the live. And that Kelly's talking about, I very much look forward to that. I think she's got some great and unique insights on the case. I'm anxious to hear them. And as we move forward, I'm ready to continue this in the next episode and talk about it even further. Right? There we go. On to the next.
On to the next, Big Jeff. Yeah, I'd like to hear it. I don't know. I think you might get a new handle out of that, Big Jeff. It was Big Jeff is a Denny. Big Jeff is a Denny.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of meaningless to me, as it should be meaningless to Bobby Dassey too. What is it? He's going to get a visit from the Manitowoc cops. Okay, well, he got one already in 2017. So what? That's all it's ever going to amount to. But if it can get his brother and his uncle out of jail because there's a Denny suspect that could have been named, yeah, why not? Who cares?
Awesome. Well, thank you again for those wrap-up comments, Big Jeff. Much appreciated. And Dr. Silkman, if you wouldn't give us your summation for today.
Look, this really was a jam-packed episode. I think we got the good, the bad, and the ugly. Always when we're talking about Brendan Dassey, it is such a tragic event. And some of the excuses by the judges were totally piss poor and inappropriate in my opinion. I'm really enjoying what we're discussing as a panel. It's fantastic that we all can give our opinions and our thoughts. And I'm really looking forward to this particular aspect of the case in which Kathleen Zellner did a timed reconstruction. And in essence, that's really all it is. It's a timed reconstruction. Do things fit? And I do believe that Bobby Dassey does make a perfect Denny suspect. I'm not saying that Bobby committed any crime or did anything nefarious, but you could only go with what you've got. And I'm really looking forward to further discussions with the panel on this. I know that I've personally spent a lot of time at this aspect, and it'll be great to get everyone's opinions. And thank you so much. And thank you, panel. Fantastic discussions as usual. And thanks everyone in chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. I really appreciate that and those comments today. Kelly, that means it's your turn to give us your wrap up and lead us out of episode 41. Oh my God.
Yeah, just to reflect back on the entire episode, I have to start with what Big Jeff kind of started with as well, especially the review of Kathleen when she was, speaking on behalf of, Laura's performance in terms of, the en banc and how she was able to or not answer certain questions. In a sense, and Dr. Silkman does address this, he did address this in the episode in terms of, the angle that Laura took. Was it as powerful in terms of, their direction versus knowing the case and utilizing the other aspects of it, like the DNA? But everyone, this is again in hindsight, and even for Kathleen, as critical as she was, everyone reflects back to the woulda, couldas, and shouldas. It's just like you have a verbal argument with someone and you walk away, and in your head, you're reliving in your head that argument, and you're like, oh, if only I would have said this, and only I would have said that. And you got to also give Laura a lot of credit as well. She took the stand and she held her head high and she gave it what she could. When we really digest the layers of what the questions were, you now have to ask yourself, was it even a win there ever? Like, the questions they gave her almost feels like not a setup, because I don't think there's any kind of corruption, but I just don't think, when I say the questions they gave her, it doesn't feel like no matter what answer she would have given, they would have, it would have been perfect for what the answers that they seeked. It wouldn't have matched their expectations, basically. And I'm not trying to be rude, and I'm totally not trying to be disrespectful on Kathleen when I say this, because I see why she addressed it. I really do. But, in hindsight, people have in the community and other lawyers have addressed that Kathleen has made fundamental mistakes as well by dropping the pro se motion and cause a few issues in that perspective. Do I know, or do I even understand what that really means? No, I don't. But I think there's people in the community like Travis and Tracy who are practicing lawyers or have had something to do with the law and understands it, has addressed this and have said that was an issue. So I won't go any more on that because that's just not fair, because I don't know the basics of it. And then obviously we're moving into the Bobby part. Like I said before, this is now the case. This is where we're at. It is a lot of layers, and I think that everyone in chat deserve that. There's going to be a level of not disagreements, but maybe things that just might get said that we might not agree upon. Some might not know about it, but this is what it's all about. It's just the discussion. And I'm looking forward to it. If it's even possible that we can make it happen for everyone and ourselves, that'll be great. If not, it is what it is. I just want to thank the panel, as always. Jeff Jones, again, you as well. You're a great host and you're always accommodating to all of us. And to everyone in chat that come every week, that support us, who ask the questions and want more, because that's what we're all here for, the truth and the boys to be free. I'll leave it as that, and peace out, y'all.
I don't think anybody could add another word to that, Kel, so I won't even try. This is Jeff Jones saying, this has been Discussing a Murderer.